All right. Well, we're officially live there, Dave. So hello, everybody. Eric Rubidoux, founder and CEO here at Ebu Digital. And with me today, Dave Acup. And we're going to be talking about Dave's experience with adopting AI and piloting AI within a not-profit organization. And one of the reasons that I was really excited to talk to Dave and got more excited once we got talking is, Dave's experience was on the ground. I think there's a lot of talk in our sector right now about the theoretical and like the frameworks and what we could be doing with AI. And what I really loved about your experience, Dave, is it was very much a let's plug it in and let's try some stuff, which I think is really interesting. So let's hear a little less from me and a little bit more from you, but maybe give us a little history of how you got into the sector and your work you were doing at Environmental Defense Fund, and maybe what it was like when AI kind of came on the scene, and what got you sort of pushing towards that pilot project to start with.
Sure. Hi everyone. I was at EDF for about 15 and a half years. And prior to joining EDF, I worked in a variety of marketing roles in the for-profit sector. I worked for an extended period at AOL, and I was one of the people who was carpet bombing the world of software. I had to atone for those sins by then toward the end of my career at AOL working on retention marketing, so hoping to retain the folks that we brought in. And then I did a stint doing digital advertising, digital marketing in between those. And after about half of my career was over, I was looking at it and saying, I really want to use my marketing skills for good. So I decided to move into the nonprofit sector. And there was a wonderful opportunity to join EDF. I'm passionate about their mission and their values aligned with mine. And I joined on the membership fundraising marketing side, and did that for probably about 8 years or so, and then focused exclusively just on the marketing side, really trying to broaden out the audiences that we were targeting, trying to find new audiences, how we're incorporating new technologies and new approaches into our marketing. And so when AI came onto the scene, at least generative AI, traditional AI has been around forever, but once generative AI started to come into the picture, it became really exciting to see just the image generation and things that you could do from Midjourney and other tools, but there really wasn't any practical application of that other than the gee whiz, isn't this cool? But then when ChatGPT launched, there was instant recognition of the potential value and impact that could have. Mm-hmm. So once that was on the scene, even within just like I think that it came out at the end of November of 2022. By the end of December, there was a bunch of us nerds that were saying, look at this, isn't this cool? Look at all the things that we could potentially be doing with this. So in January of that year, we decided that we just wanted to figure out how do we pilot some type of AI project. Is this something that we could potentially use? Is it interesting? AI or EDF was an early adopter of a lot of things. And so it was sort of just natural for us to move forward with this. Yeah. Like I said, there was other people besides myself that were really excited about AI and saw potential. So we got together, had an internal Slack conversation about what should we do with this? How could we approach this? One of the people who was really knee deep into AI, much more than the rest of us, had recommended that we use this tool Jasper, which is a purpose-built tool just for marketing communications applications. And we thought, okay, well, let's see if this is something that we can actually do. We really wanted to just use this pilot to familiarize ourselves with what was possible with generative AI. Get some hands-on real-life experience, doing some testing and some other approaches, and also kind of to address the fear factor that people had with AI. There was a lot of early speculation that this is going to take my job, and so we wanted to address that particular issue. And so we recruited people from our membership, our email team, our digital advertising team, our social media folks, our web content team, and then we also pulled in some people from communications, traditional media relations. And we said, we're using this tool, Jasper. It seems like it's an extremely easy to use tool. We didn't do a formal review of all the available tools that were out. Really came on the recommendation of our internal person, and also just because it seemed like it would be an easy sell internally, because it's all focused on Marcom. And it was really, really affordable. We did the pro plan for 5 users. I just checked the pricing for that. That's gone up significantly since we used it, but it was relatively inexpensive. So we didn't have to sell anybody on it.
Nice.
And I was a vice president at the time, so I had sort of the executive buy-in for myself, that we didn't need to go and find someone else. So it worked out really well from that. In order to participate in the pilot, we really did make people commit to certain things. They had to test out the tool and spend time learning the tool and conducting different types of tests. And that they also had to share that information regularly with the team of testers. And then also folks who were related to the test, but not necessarily hands-on in the tool. And we also said that in order to do this participation, you have to commit to joining us in a workshop. So within April of that year, we were hosting a workshop for all of Marcom, all of membership, to give them an overview of what we had used Jasper for, what was it good for, what was it not good for, how would we recommend using it or other tools that were out, mainly ChatGPT, but other tools that people could be thinking about using for the same things that we were using it for. So, we found that brainstorming was fantastic with it. We had a couple subject lines for emails that were quite innovative. We tested head-to-head for advertising, digital advertising. Some of them did really well, some of them not so well. Some of them were just flat. But I think one of the things that we didn't do with this, Jasper, the beauty of Jasper is that it can learn over time. It can learn your voice. If you feed it and say, this was bad, this was good. We didn't do that because we were overwhelmed by the number of people who raised their hand to volunteer for this pilot. So we had to keep the use of this relatively tight as far as the number of months that people could commit. And after the workshop, we pivoted from that group of users to another group of users. So that first group of users really didn't get the full benefit of being able to use Jasper for everything that it's capable of doing. It sounds like this is an advertisement for Jasper. It's not. That's just how we were using it. And so that's something definitely that we would have changed, I think, going forward. But the good thing of the pilot project, it sort of broke the seal on AI. People started using ChatGPT. And sharing how that they were using it, saying that they felt empowered, that made them smarter. So all good things that you would hope that people would be saying. And I think that looking back on it, I would have also increased the number of seat licenses. Like I said, it was a relatively inexpensive investment. So I would have had more people using it than what they did. At about the same time, if I remember correctly, that we were doing the pilot, we were also looking at, this really should have a larger governance structure, a larger framework. So a group of people within the Marcom team got together to begin putting together our AI policy. And we pulled in people from our diversity, equity, and inclusion team. We also pulled in people from our social scientists team. We were, instead of starting with a complete blank piece of paper, we went to ChatGPT and we said, if we're to create an AI policy, what should it include? So it spit out a bunch of ideas, which we went through and culled down to what we thought was a manageable number. But it turned out that it was, we were trying to be very, very comprehensive So we talked about things around like tool selection, data privacy. What are the ethical considerations that you should be thinking about? How do you deal with bias? What about accountability? This policy turned into like a 17-page document, so it was quite the behemoth.
Yeah.
But we all were very proud of it, so we turned it into EDF's policy review committee, which had people from the legal team, the IT team, the HR team, and they all basically had the same reaction that other people who reviewed it. It was a giant record scratch. They're just like, wait, this is way too big. And so the policy kind of collapsed under its own weight. So they said, let's dial this back a little bit. And it was also very focused on Marcom. And so they said, let's broaden this out to be inclusive of the entire organization. And let's also pare this back to be just a set of guidelines that is easily managed and can also evolve with the evolution of AI. We also looked at it, added some quick do's and don'ts, because it needed to be something that people could be very, very, at a glance, they could see, what am I supposed to be doing with this thing? The guidelines that were eventually produced were still manageable. I mean, they were about 3 or 4 pages long, nothing too onerous, but really encouraged people to experiment with AI and looking for different types of use cases across the organization.
Cool.
So
great.
One of the things that was also included in the guidelines was an advisory council. So there was a recommendation on the creation of an AI advisory council that had representation from across the organization. I would highly recommend keeping that to about 7 to 8 people. Having anything much larger than that is going to completely, bog down. I know that in the nonprofit space, we like to be really inclusive and we like to have a lot of voices around the table. That I think would be counterproductive in a situation like this. So 7 to 8 people, which is what we were shooting for with the advisory council. We also met with the executive team to present the guidelines. And in that presentation, it was interesting how enthusiastic they were about AI. They were thinking about AI in ways that we weren't even, approaching at that time. So there was definitely a lot of excitement at the very, very top from the president on down. So that was encouraging. We knew we were onto something and that we would have executive buy-in on a consistent basis across the board. So
how important would you say that executive buy-in is? As you look back on your experience. I mean, I know you had obviously, as you mentioned earlier, you were at an executive level, and so that obviously helped grease the wheel, so to speak. You were an executive, and you were super interested and saw the value. In scenarios where that's maybe not already established, how important do you think that that sort of senior leadership buy-in is?
Well, I think that there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction around AI within the nonprofit space. They just think, oh, it's completely evil, we can't be using it. Or some one organization will have a little bit of a stumble, and therefore everybody sort of takes a long pause. I think having the senior leadership really buy in on this is tremendously important. It shows that the organization is committed, that they see the value, that there is going to be commitment to moving this forward. Exactly how that materializes and how it evolves, I think, is unique to each organization. But definitely having that senior leadership recognize the potential and communicate their support is extremely important.
Yeah. Now, you were sort of saying, your leadership, even when you started engaging with them, was excited and was kind of had a whole bunch of their own ideas about things. Like how common do you think that is? And then I guess the question is, like, how do we go about educating perhaps leadership who maybe don't know what it is, or more still on that kind of like, should we be afraid of this train?
I don't know how common it is. I think that it's definitely becoming more prevalent in nonprofits. Certainly, there's a lot of conversations that are happening in conferences and webinars. Not that senior executives are attending either of those things, but their leadership and reports likely are. So I think that the conversations are definitely happening. I don't know that definitively. I haven't read that, but I think that there's more individuals out there that are recognizing the potential. I think it's really just understanding how to harness it and what makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess as you go back to the pilot project that you guys were running, what was the big nut you were trying to crack? Was it just seeing what was in there? What was the sort of big thing you were trying to solve for with the project?
I think it was, having a good understanding of how we can use it, what it's good for, what it's not good for, and where we saw some early success and some early wins. That was extremely important for us to understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we approached the pilot pretty casually. We didn't have, solid use cases and KPIs, which we probably should have done, and made that much more formal and documented. I think that we would have had some more robust testing. Luckily, EDF is blessed with people who are very curious and prodigious testers. So that happened pretty organically. But I think if we had identified, these are the use cases that we want this thing to do, these are the KPIs that we are going to use to measure it, I think we probably would have gotten a little bit more out of the effort.
Yeah, that's interesting. You'd sort of alluded to the idea of especially with the policy initially, kind of aiming for that wide, inclusive, maybe not perfection, but something that really kind of encompassed. And I remember that era kind of early on in AI where everyone felt like, oh God, we've got to have the rules laid out like this. This thing's shifting on the regular. Like we got to put some framework around this. How would you approach it now if you were to, knowing benefit of hindsight, knowing what you know? Is there something you would have done a little differently?
Yeah, I think we would have probably started with the advisory council first, and having those 7 or 8 people come around the table, having the conversations with the executives to understand their interest and level of commitment, and also risk taking. Opportunities. So I think I would start with those 2 things before I moved into the creation of the guidelines or the policy or whatever you want to call it. And thinking also about the various use cases across the organization. So those 7 or 8 people who are on the advisory council can be talking to their divisions or departments and thinking about what are the use cases that we could potentially use this for. I think surfacing those use cases and understanding how the organization is thinking about making use of this is critically important. And it also helps to understand and identify what is the adoption curve going to look like, what is our roadmap for implementation look like, and what departments do we really think are going to be the most benefited from this approach. That was also one of the things that we were trying to figure out from the pilot was also what kind of an increase can we see in some of the campaigns that we're running? And does that then help us justify moving forward with a particular approach or tool? If we're seeing 2x the response rates because we're using Jasper to write subject lines, then that certainly would help us prioritize the implementation of that. So we wanted to have a good understanding of what that might be able to produce.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Curious, so as you went through the project, what were some of the highs and some of the lows?
Well, we also, in addition to doing that, we also launched a Slack channel on just focused on AI. It was open to anybody in the organization. So, I think one of the highs was really just seeing across the organization how much excitement and interest there was in just AI. So there was really good conversations happening in that space, and people you didn't even really expect. I mean, across EDF was a global organization, or is a global organization. So people across the world, chiming in on our Slack channel was kind of fun. So that was definitely a high. I think perhaps one of the lows was we didn't have, like I said, we didn't have a clear use case or KPIs. So I don't know that we, at the end of that, other than just really the general sense that AI is something that we wanted to continue to leverage and explore, we didn't have the definitive information that I think would be really useful, particularly now as AI has gotten much more scrutiny, to sort of overcome any obstacles that might be thrown our way. Like I said, our executive leadership was very excited about this, and so we didn't necessarily have that. But I think if another person or another organization were doing this, this pilot project, if it's set up properly, could be really good in sort of combating any type of friction or speed bumps that they might encounter.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think that every organization attempting to or being AI curious, if you will, is going to be in a totally different scenario. So it sounds like really giving the time to sort of to give yourself the sort of data framework to say what are the things that we're hoping this will move forward, improvements in X, Y, or Z, so that you can point back to it, to especially if you're fighting an uphill battle and saying, hey, give us the room to run the little pilot project so we can try it out, so that you can actually you can do that reporting back and say, hey, you know what? Great news. These things moved forward, or you know what? Hey, we learned something. This wasn't the right use of of this, but we saw some really interesting stuff here or there. So yeah, that's really insightful.
Yeah, and it also might be helpful in securing even a modest budget. Most of these tools that are out now, at least the chat tools, are relatively cheap. $20 a month. And Meta's even rolling out free stuff. So being able to justify even a modest investment of $500 a quarter or something like that to play with various tools would certainly be much easier if you've got a really solid data-driven pilot that you can point to.
That makes a lot of sense. Just out of curiosity, are there tools you're playing with right now that you're saying these Jasper, obviously we've talked about? What are some of the other tools you're kind of exploring in the last little while that are stand out for you or are interesting?
Well, I love playing with all of the various chat tools, just because they each of them have kind of their own personality, if you will, and are useful for different things. I'm really trying to figure out Zaps through here. So I try to just come up with different types of agents that I want to see if I can do different approaches or different, try to achieve some kind of efficiencies. So that has been where I spent a decent amount of time just looking through that and figuring that out. Luckily, LinkedIn has wonderful training on this. So there's a few I guess tips and tricks that I wouldn't have figured out on my own, that once I watched a LinkedIn a LinkedIn training video, I was like, oh, I wish I had watched that a long time ago. So
yeah, I've felt that about many a training video over the years. You watch something, you self-teach something, and then you go back and you do a little course on it and think, oh wow, some of these things would have been amazing to know as I was sort of roughing through this the hard way. So one of the questions that we had was, what do you see as the big opportunity out there for nonprofits? As you looking backwards at the experience that you had, forwards into your next role, and really what you see in the sector. What do you see as the big opportunity for organizations out there?
Well, I think you're starting to see a lot more organizations talk about everything is powered by AI. Now it's just, that's the hot buzz term. So even traditional AI, which is the predictive aspect, many organizations, many vendors and partners are talking about whatever it is that they're doing, powered by AI. So a lot of that, I think, is very exciting, because you're starting to see them move in directions that maybe was already on their roadmap, but now because ChatGPT is out, that has been accelerated. So there's huge opportunity, I think, for nonprofits in that, just the implementation of that, riding that wave. And then along efficiencies, I think that there's huge, like with Zapier, like I said, I'm always looking for trying to make things much more efficient. And, as a sector, we're overworked. And so we have long days and strong commitment. So any type of tool that can help us, address that, I'm all for. So I think that there's huge opportunities that there just for people to feel like they've got some control back of their day and some agency. And also that they can feel like that they're focused on things that really make a difference. A lot of what we do is not necessarily a wise use of time, but it's stuff that has to get done. So I'm excited about those aspects. Certainly the generative, I think that where things are headed with the videos, imagery, there's huge opportunity with that. The customization, the segmentation, the one-to-one segmentation that, has been touted forever in marketing as the holy grail, I think is much closer than what we think. And so, we're all struggling with, finding good donors that have strong lifetime value. And, if this is a tool that can help us do that much more efficiently, with fewer resources, I'm all for it.
Yeah, no, makes a great point. And you hit it. I mean, I think that so many organizations are, a lot of being part of the workforce now is technical. There's a lot of technical stuff, and organizations are, for lack of better words, have been really great at collecting data over the last number of years. But one of the things that I've certainly seen from my exposure to organizations is the skill set internally to work with the different data sets to actually get the answers out that they want is a real challenge within organizations. And I think one of the things that's really exciting from my perspective is that being able to conversationally interact with your data, like as long as you have the confidence in it, right? Like you don't want to, that part needs to be sorted. But if you have that level of confidence within your organizational data, and then to be able to really give people who never had the technical resources, or had to wait 6 months to get get the report that they needed, kind of thing, can now just engage with the organizational data. And I'm really curious to see where that will go in terms of opening up, just people's creativity and ability to see really interesting things within the organizational data, and bring that up and create. We were just talking with a fellow on our internal, Matthew Divins, and he was showing us a bunch of the StatsCan data that he pulls every year. He just takes the Statistics Canada data, puts it into a dashboard, and there's something really powerful about suddenly just seeing data in front of you. Even though you can read the stats, but then suddenly you can flick it into a chart and you can say, oh wow, like look at this trend line. Where is this going? It opens up so many questions, and I think that's one of those things that has been behind the knowledge wall in a way within our organizations. Like we have all this data, but there's only a handful of people that have the skill set or the training to actually get in there and pull that out and make sense of it. And so for me, that's one thing that I think is really, really exciting about the sort of the comings of this generative AI, where we can kind of be engaging conversationally with our data. I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, and I look at that as like more on the productivity side. And as marketers, I mean, that's basically how we learn. You're constantly querying the data. What if we looked at it this way? What if we looked at it that way? And that's where inspiration comes from, and that's where solutions come from. But when you're having to funnel those requests through a data team or a reporting and analytics team, you kind of sort of censor yourself, because you're like, I really would like to look at it a little bit different, but I've already made 2 requests and they're really going to get angry, and I'm sure they've got other things on their to-do list. So one of the podcasts I listened to is the Marketing AI Institute podcast, and they were just talking about this. Paul Reitzer was like, I don't want to have to learn how to create these custom dashboards. I just want to be able to talk to it and say, this is what I'm looking for. And so I think that will be huge. I don't know how far away that is, but it certainly is very exciting for marketers. From executives all the way down. I mean, that I think really is going to open up a lot of creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping an eye on the time here. I know we're kind of coming on our full use, and I don't want to be respectful of your time, but before we kind of get into breaking here, you couple of maybe key points of advice in terms of organizations looking to get started, and maybe a quick plug for your you're running a nonprofits group for AI and LinkedIn, and so we want to make sure that people connect with you to check that out as well. So, but yeah, any advice that you would you'd recommend for people just looking to kind of dip their toe in and figure out where to get started?
Well, if they're just dipping their toe in, I mean, I think the Google survey that just came out in March said that like 40% of organizations don't have anybody who's even knowledgeable about AI. So, begin to play with some of these things. Certainly you're not, use your best judgment. You're not going to be importing, privacy or PII information, or anything that's proprietary to your organization, but get familiar with them, and really focus on maybe one or two tools. Don't try to cover off on everything. So I would say just get that exposure, and if the organization is interested, secure that executive champion or that executive buy-in, so that you can grease the skids for everything that comes after that.
Yep.
If you don't have a full policy, try doing a small pilot project. And even if it's just a pilot project using ChatGPT, or Claude or Gemini or whatever it might be, just commit to that, come up with what is it that your use cases are, and approach it for a sprint of 2 or 3 months, and see what you get on the backside of that. And then communicate that information. Don't keep it within just your team. Communicate it outside of your organ or your department, so that others can see the impact and benefit of it. And like you said, we do have on LinkedIn, I started a group for people who are either using AI or just AI curious. And it's an invite only group, and I'm keeping it focused just on NGO participants. So at this point, trying to keep out the non-NGO staff, really just so that it's a safe space for NGOs teams to be talking about this. Eventually, when I think that AI gets much more mainstream, then opening it up to anybody who's interested in joining it. But
yeah, that's awesome. Well, if those who qualify want to find out, best way to get in touch with you, just find you on LinkedIn and reach out.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, Dave, I want to thank you for your time today. This was really great, really enlightening. I think it's really important that you did the work that you did, for lack of better words, because I think there's been a lot of talk about organizations starting to use AI, but it takes someone to do it. It takes someone to, their mistakes will be made, but it takes someone brave enough to say, I'll be the one. Like, I'm willing to experiment, start a pilot, and figure out where this goes. So I think you've done I think you did a great thing, for your organization, no doubt. But I really appreciate you coming on today and talking to us about it, and sharing your perspective with the sector, because I think hopefully it will inspire other people to do the same. To secure a little budget, develop an internal group, press their leadership for the opportunity, and hopefully we'll actually leverage some of these really great potential tools to our advantage. So thank you so much for joining us here today, and thank you everybody for joining along. So y'all have a great day.
Appreciate it. All right.